there's a lot of nuance, caveat to everything, and that's the thing where people want something to be reductive. Like if someone fucking dies, then it's like people are gonna crowd around them and say like, oh, they were like da 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 da, or they were da da da. And exactly, I don't want to give anybody that opportunity. It's like even if I was suicidal, I am such a fucking egocentric fucker that I wouldn't want people to be able to write the narrative of me. Whoa, looks icy.
Yeah, and that person wouldn't let me over.
Be careful. And that's the same thing with these videos or anything. It's like you want to talk about a topic. It's like I hate being reduced, and it's like, and sometimes people fall into the trap, or I will put myself into the trap of like I'll say something really simple. Like I think in general psychology is bullshit, but there's obviously a lot of fucking nuance to that opinion. And I could talk about it for like an hour of like why I generally think psychology is bullshit, why I generally think going to a therapist is bullshit. And I've said this to somebody when I was in college, 25 or whatever. And they're like, "Oh, really? I don't know. I actually think it's really good or whatever." And I'm like, "I'm studying psychology. I'm like, I just think it's just like garbage." And they're like, "I don't know. It's like it definitely helps me. Like I go to like a psychologist and da-da-da." It's like, yeah, like on your like emotional level, and if you're also not to be too insulting, if you're not an introspective person, like it's cool to be able to understand something about a situation that you didn't quite look at before. And I understand that a lot of people aren't very introspective, but to the group of people that are actually, and I know it's coming across super pretentious, but to the group of people who are actually genuinely introspective, who look at themselves in the mirror, who look at themselves in the context of their social group or their economic status or whatever, just when they truly measure themselves and they try to be, and I know that there's always a personal perspective on all of it, but when they try to be at least pretty genuine and objective about like the measure of man, or woman, I was saying man as in people, then going to a psychologist, in my opinion, is just paying somebody to fucking talk to you. Like it's cool to like have someone, quote unquote, listen to you, but at the same time, I mean, you can kind of just repeat the last thing they say and give them positive affirmation, and then think about what you're going to do on the weekend, and you can be a psychologist doing that. You know what I mean? And I've called a suicide hotline number not because I was going to actually just kill myself that night, but I was feeling kind of like manic, and I'm just like I'm not diagnosed with anything. I don't think I'm like bipolar or depressed or anything. But it was just like one of these nights where I was just like restless. It was like late at night. I was fucking restless, and I was just feeling like kind of bad, but also kind of like surge of energy. I called the suicide hotline, and I ended up getting just like more like irritated than I was before calling. It was just this scripted bullshit. It reminded me when I used to work at a call center as a customer service representative. It literally just reminded me that, like, I picture this woman picking up this phone. I'm calling a fucking suicide hotline, and she's just going down this list. It is so like, it's just so funny because someone calling that line desperately needs like real, genuine human connection. And when you call that line, you get like a fucking robot giving you scripted responses, like they're literally reading from a piece of paper. It doesn't feel like you're even talking to somebody. It feels like I might as well talk to this camera. I might as well look in the mirror. I might as well smoke weed and look in the fucking mirror and make faces at myself and talk to myself and have a conversation with myself, which I've done hundreds of fucking times. You know what I mean? That's how it feels. And so the reductiveness, and this is what I was trying to get at. I jump all over when I'm talking, but when it comes to like painting a picture of what someone's thoughts are, if you don't dehumanize somebody like people do in like war times or whatever, and you don't reduce them into a dog or a fucking cockroach, when someone dies, it's like people come out of the woodwork and they all act like they were like best friends, and they reduce them into this like tiny little fucking narrative where they say like 2 sentences and that defines the person because they get to write the narrative. And when it comes, and let's not even talk about people dying, let's talk about someone's opinion. It's like same thing with my opinion of like, I think psychology is bullshit. it's not as simple as like, it's bullshit, it's totally useless, it's useless for everybody, it's always bullshit, there's no good psychologist, if you go there, you're a dumbass. Like, that's not, it's clearly not my opinion. And if you think that's my opinion, you are trying to reduce me. You know what I mean? There's clearly going to be caveats, and there's going to be nuance to any and I think if you do have an intellectual integrity, and if you are being fair to people, you should automatically assume that there is nuance to their opinion, even if they say something very like plain, like psychology's bullshit. If you would assume that they're not a total idiot, if you're an intelligent person and you're assuming, if you're not a total narcissist and you're also assuming that they're reasonably intelligent, maybe they can't quite articulate things really well in one sentence, like no one can. That's the thing about it. You need a collage. You need a collage of conversation to really represent your viewpoint on a subject. And that's the same thing with art. And that's why, like, getting a tattoo scares the shit out of me, because I know once I get one tattoo that people are going to essentially define me for that one tattoo. Not as a whole, and even that can be reductive to the point of just being stupidity on your part. But I'm saying, like, they look, oh, what kind of tattoos this guy got? And it's like a turtle, right? It's like, nah, I'm the turtle guy, right? I walk into a room, first conversation somebody has with me, maybe I was really hungry, and I'm like, man, I could use a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Then I'm that peanut butter and jelly sandwich guy. Because if it's the only experience that someone has with you, that is your full experience. So that is the full experience of you to them. And you, in some ways, are exactly how everyone else perceives you to be. I think people get that wrong in their head, where they think that they're this great person because they have this narrative in their head that, like, no matter what they do, they always think, like, at the end of the day, they're a good person and, like, everything they do is righteous and da-da-da-da. But, like, maybe you're not. And maybe someone, like, there's definitely somebody who hates my guts. And I can, like, name people. I can name probably a couple people that really don't like me. And in my opinion, these things are always, while I want to say things are not as ambiguous as they seem, to an outside observer, if you get both sides of the story, if you listen to their story about me and why they hate me, then yeah, you would probably hate me too, right? But then if you listen to my story, then it's kind of like, it's a little different, and frankly, you'd probably agree with me. That's the thing with people. So, like, you are pretty much exactly how people view you. You are obviously how you view yourself, but frankly, you are one of many. And if you don't overemphasize the importance of yourself, if you don't have a completely, totally overinflated ego, you would realize how people, and it sounds like such a square thing to say, it sounds like such a conformist thing to say, but you would realize that what other people view of you is actually extremely important, and it in some ways does define you better than how you define yourself. For you to try to define yourself on outside consciousnesses other than yourself is actually almost more defining than just defining yourself in the mirror to yourself in your own fucking echo chamber of your own loneliness. You know what I mean? You do need outside experiences and to hang out with other people to really, like, and while I like I'm saying before that these views can be reductive, and it sucks, and it sucks when somebody doesn't give you the respect of really highlighting how complex people can be, or a situation can be. It's the same thing with art, and that's what I was saying. And this just sounds like schizophrenic ramblings. Like maybe I have some problem that's not diagnosed. I don't know. But it's this is like what I'm talking about exactly, though. It's so hard just to say 2 + 2 is 4, because not a lot of things, when it comes to psychology and people and philosophy and stuff, not a lot of things are that reductive and easy to define. So it's like, even with art, what's going on?
I don't know, I thought that semi-truck guy was, like, in line for it, but I'm like, that's way too many times.
Is he? Okay. And not, so anyway, even with art, it's kind of like, so I get a tattoo, and that's why it scares the shit out of me. It's like, as much as I think, like, oh man, getting a tattoo would be badass, and, like, I really want to, like, represent myself with, like, a tattoo, like, this, like, means something to me. It's not the only thing that means something to me, and it's not my life. So, like, I can get a tattoo that where, like, I'm really big on, you know, determinism. How do you get a tattoo of that, right? I mean, the whole cause and effect thing. I think there's cool tattoos with cause and effect, or even a tattoo, like, you know, it is what it is. You know, I know people have that tattoo too. I looked online, like IIWII or whatever. I've seen that. I think that's cool. To make the sentence. I don't know what that's called, like monogrammic or whatever. I'm literally making that word up. I don't know what it's called, where like you shorten a word with like one letter. But I actually think it's kind of cool. It kind of look cool. But it's like, and I actually think that, I personally think that's a lot deeper than it is surface level. If somebody's not giving it a chance, like, oh, it is what it is. What a stupid tattoo. I mean, it all technically is what it is. I mean, it's the truest thing you could ever say, right? I mean, it is what it is. And as every single year that goes by, it just becomes more and more true for me. It's the only honest thing anyone could really say. I mean, it is what it is to what? It's to the whole and not to the individual, because it is to the individual, their narrative, their own biased perspective. And that's the same thing with my own life, is like my life in my head. I'm always going to be the main character in my head. I'm always going to be the good guy. I'm always going to be making these like decisions that, even if I'm fucking somebody over, like they are just in some way, because, you know, it's a means to an end of some sort of better outcome. And maybe some people aren't that genuine. Maybe some people just want to, you know, take $5 from somebody, right? But because they deserve it, though, right? That's always kind of the narrative. If somebody's doing something, they do think it's right, even if it's a wrong thing. Most of the time, they will I want to say 99% of the time, they will justify it to themselves in some way. Even if it's simply just that, even if it's an egocentric, like, narcissist argument of like, oh, I'm God and they are sheep. Like, you're justifying it by saying you are more deserving, you are more worthy, whatever, etc., etc. And that's the thing with defining someone's opinion or art or anything. It's like you need a smorgasbord. Was that what it's called? Smorgasbord? You need a collage. You need ramblings. You need ramblings of for hours to really define a position in something, in my opinion, not just like one sentence. That's the thing. And it's so easy when you have this view on life that like you are better. And a lot of people kind of have this view, I think, that they are like the main character and they are like somehow like they're smarter, and like it's like, I mean, I admit I think that too. Like, I think I'm actually a bigger like intellectual than a lot of people that I come across, but who knows? Maybe they have really, really quality thoughts and I just don't give enough time to really, you know, output them, because I think a quality thought is not necessarily always, you know, portrayed. Even if somebody has a quality thought, it can come out like one sentence bullshit and it's not fleshed out, and then you reduce it to that one sentence, and now you're thinking, well, my thoughts on the matter are actually so much more advanced. But then when it comes down to it, your advanced thoughts are to yourself and not to that person either, so they could be thinking the exact same thing about you. I can look in the mirror and think about some philosophy shit for 3 hours, you know, and think I'm really, really smart, and it's like a mental exercise. It's you know, mental masturbation. I can do that every single day, and I do that. And that's why I think a lot of people adopt this viewpoint that they're smarter than everyone else. And I do, and I fall into the trap, right? I'm looking around, I'm at a gas station, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, like, I don't think these people are as introspective as me. I just don't think they are. I don't think they're as intellectually honest, or their intellectual integrity is as high as mine. But then again, it's the ramblings of some kind of autist now, you know what I mean? It's the ramblings of some fucking schizophrenic autist. And you got to define this. It's only been 13 minutes. I feel like I've been talking for an hour. The whole thing with yeah, I started with like dying. I started the whole video with dying, but the whole thing is, it's like you do one piece of art, and that's why people, it's like building yourself, and that's the thing. That's why I think that's innate in people, is the whole collection thing, and as much as it's almost like related to serial killers. They keep fucking trophies of the people they killed, right? To build this collection, this collage of, you know, trophies or whatever that they're, you know, proud of. And that's a lot of people. Some people have DVD collections. Some people have, you know, they expand their art portfolio, and they do art to almost further define themselves, or to further define that aspect of themselves, to define their art. You know what I mean? You do one piece of art, and then you are that art. You do 20 pieces of art and like, here's a more complete picture. Like, here's a more dynamic picture of you. That's with anything. It's with art, it's with a movie collection, it's with like a conversation. The more you talk to somebody, the more humanized that person's gonna be to you. And that's the same thing with like these like racist people or anything. You know, someone who's like, you know, really racist and they don't talk to like the blacks or whatever. But if they really sit down with like, if they really sit down with an intelligent black man and they talk to them for, you know, 3 hours, most reasonable people are going to come out of that interaction with the other person more humanized in their head. And they will probably, even if they don't want to admit it, be less racist. You know what I mean? I'm not saying, like, I mean, sure, people are fucking 40 years old and maybe they've only had bad experiences with, you know, Mexicans or whatever, and that kind of helps shape them, and then there's this reverberation of other social factors, other people around them with these views, and it kind of like, it kind of pushes it more into position, right? So it's kind of the thing to think now, and now they view it through that frame. So if somebody does something ambiguous, and this is pretty big in life, if somebody does something ambiguous, then you think, well, like this Mexican doing this thing that's ambiguous, like, they have ill intentions, right? But if this white guy's doing this thing ambiguous, he's probably just downtown Charlie getting drunk. That's all right. He's being a little sloppy right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's excuses for the people that you want excuses for. If I go into a room and just literally point at the next random person and say, this person's an asshole, and I can frame every interaction through that lens of thinking, this person's a conniving asshole, this person's selfish, this person's gonna fuck me over. Anything they do is gonna be colored by that, you know, preconceived notion. So I don't know. It's really hard. It's hard to get away from, and that's the thing. And I have a lot of. And I've had situations like that in my life where I don't necessarily think somebody's an asshole, but it's kind of like they do something, and I really, as much as I try to think about their perspective, I have this very, like, this efficiency-minded perspective, and if you are not also, like, an efficiency, polite, defensive person socially, like, that's like my view of society. I will judge somebody really quick if they seem careless. Like, it's almost like, I'm not saying it's almost like a racist, like, you know, there's people who, like, don't like other people for whatever, like, somebody yelling?
No, I told him that was broken, and you said thank you, like, oh, it wasn't working. I was like, you're welcome.
There's people who, God, let me just end the video. There's people who will judge other people, and for whatever reasons, whatever, like, aesthetic or physical reasons or whatever, and it's almost similar in a way, and I'm not trying to say like I'm like a racist, but it's kind of like when I judge somebody socially, I cannot stand when someone's socially careless. Like, I put a lot of emphasis on, like, being a polite member of society and being very careful and being socially defensive in most situations and being very, like, aware of my surroundings. And I think, like, people who are not like that, I have these almost racist-like opinions about people like that. I'm not saying it's a race thing at all, but it's like, it's a similar thing where I think, like, wow, this person just, like, grew up in a real fucking bubble, didn't they? Like, that's what I view people, like, when they're just careless socially. I just think, like, they're really privileged. I think they grew up in some fucking bubble, some insulated bubble where they could afford to make mistakes that other people couldn't afford to make, and that's why they're careless. And I judge them really harshly on that. That's the thing. And it's like, is that right? It's debatable. It's probably not right, but that's, like, something that, like, I do. Like, that's something I'm biased about. I think someone's an asshole if they're not careful socially or whatever, or they're careful, like, in public, in, like, a fucking, like, if they're waiting in a queue or in a line, like, if they're interacting with somebody, like, in a public space at a restaurant or whatever. Like, I'm always very careful with those interactions usually. And yeah, it just makes me think like someone's like an asshole, and that has to do with, I guess, my situation too, where you could argue like whatever. I mean, I'm white and I'm not like living on the streets or anything, and in some ways I have privilege, but in other ways, like, my family doesn't have much money, so like I can't make big mistakes in life, like where I don't know, the whole like carelessness. You know, I was the older brother growing up. You know what I mean? I needed to be the responsible one, and it's with anything. I've been fucked over with money several times in my life too, and it's like there's like a certain careless attitude that like in a way triggers me or whatever. It just like makes me fucking upset on like emotional level, and it makes me judge people really, really harshly. And yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about, but the whole thing is it has to be an amalgamation of ideas to really get more of a complete idea, which is obvious. And it's awesome to be able to pull the bowstring back and shoot an arrow perfectly right in the fucking bullseye. And if you do one, it's almost like greatest, you know, the like one-hit wonders like in music. It's awesome if you can output something, whether it be art, whether it be a one-line zinger at a party, or a piece of philosophy that you ramble about for 10 minutes, whatever it may be. If you can just nail the fucking nail right on the head and perfectly pound it down into the board, if you can hit the bullseye perfectly with your arrow, and you can just nail it with something, then more power to you. And if you want to represent yourself with something like that for the rest of your life, I guess that's up to you, but it's not growth, you know what I mean? And people require growth, in my opinion, in life. I think that's like an innate human thing where it's like talking about the serial killer collecting fucking trophies. Like, people want to further and further represent themselves, and people who feel like they got it right, they have their one-hit wonder, they stagnate because they want to only output something as perfect as that. And it actually does cause, it's awesome having a one-hit wonder in anything, not just music, in art, in conversation, in fucking anything, in sexual exploit, whatever it may be. But it's like, it's hard when you judge everything compared to that one-hit wonder, because everything has to kind of measure up or you're failing, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of like there's word vomit, there's art vomit, and then there's like perfection. And if you are one of these unlucky people, and this is also a topic of like people who peak young or whatever, they're really handsome and charming when they're 14 years old or whatever. And other people have talked about, I know Sam Hyde talks about that, but it's really hard to kind of grow from there. And I wish I could explain it more, but we're at the store, so I guess I'll cut that off. And the final thought with that is, it is, you know, poor them, right? But there is some turmoil with a life like that, or when you do something like that, when you have like a hit like that, because some people can just kind of like they can take it day by day, they can live in the present, they can output still and not measure everything to that, and they realize they can be real. You mean you're in the middle of the aisle?
Yeah, I know.
You're just okay.
Back up.
You could just move over to the right. But then there's other people where it paralyzes them, and that's kind of what I'm saying. So it's like, sometimes it's good just to like output, and it's like, it's not always quality, but like maybe you do a doodle of like a duck. It's like, you're not gonna advance unless you do something, though. That's the thing. It's with anything economically, or they say people get paralyzed and they just don't. You need to do something in life if you want to further represent yourself or get a point across or anything. So I guess there's rambling, or there's a really, really sophisticated attack. You know, it's like war, it's like a battle. There's a really sophisticated, well thought out attack, or you can just kind of mash right into it. I don't know.